Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Secretary of State says there is no such thing as vexatious prosecutions. I think he would do well to remember the cases of Phil Shiner. In 1991, the SAS shot and killed 3 members of the IRA's East Tyrone Brigade in Cope. The coroner originally found that the soldiers' use of force was reasonable and proportionate, and that the IRA men in question had the intent to murder. A judicial review was brought against these findings, but in October last year it was thrown out by the High Court in Belfast, with the judge saying that the case was, and I quote, ludicrous and utterly divorced from reality. This morning we hear depressingly that that case is to continue 35 years after the incident and after the soldier in question has been investigated for years. How can the Secretary of State think that this is right?
Well, any citizen of the United Kingdom, as the honourable member is well aware, has a right to bring a judicial review against any decision that has been made. It is for the courts to determine that. I would join with him, having seen what the original judge said in throwing out the case, that given the fact that the inquest found that the use of force in that case was lawful, perhaps it's not surprising that the judge threw out as having no merit whatsoever. If the case is continuing, we will have to leave it to the judicial process to decide what happens, but I have confidence in our courts.
Alex Burghart.
Look, doesn't this case absolutely exemplify why the government's solution is entirely wrong? It reopens the door to vexatious litigation, which allows our veterans to be dragged through the courts, even when the courts themselves say that the case is ludicrous. And it also exposes the absurdity of the fact that legal aid is paying for these challenges against our veterans. We are all literally paying for lawyers to bring vexatious litigation against our troops. The government seems rightly to have paused its bill. Will it please use this opportunity to think again and take a new approach which guarantees that there are genuine protections for those who serve?
Well, I can assure the honourable gentleman there will be genuine protections. On the question of legal aid in Northern Ireland, that is a matter, as he well knows, for the Northern Ireland Executive. Given the case that he has cited, I was not aware that the last government at any point considered removing the right to bring judicial review against any decisions at all. If he's now advancing the argument that judicial review should not be available in certain cases, well, I would say good luck to him, because it is a foundation of our legal system.
Paul Curler, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a recent visit to Northern Ireland, I met with numerous stakeholders, including veterans, victims and survivors, all of whom are seeking justice. Yet I fear both the former Legacy Act and the current Troubles Bill conceive of justice too narrowly, via the constricting lens of lawyers preoccupied with criminal sanctions and civil compensation. Stakeholders want answers, not retribution. That is why I've tabled amendments to the Troubles Bill to formally provide the option of a restorative justice pathway for the many victims of the Troubles who simply want to know what happened. Does the Secretary of State agree that restorative justice has an important role to play in reconciliation, and will he meet with me to discuss supporting my amendments?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm always happy to meet with the honourable gentleman, and the House will have an opportunity in due course to consider the amendments that he has put down. Most of the victims that I've met, I'm sure that the same is true for the victims and families that he has met, are looking for answers. Most of them recognise that with the passage of time, the prospect of prosecutions of anybody are diminishing rapidly, and part of the focus of the Commission is to help those families to find answers. How families are then reconciled to the terrible loss that they have suffered, in the end, it will be for each family to find their own way of doing that.
Gavin Robbins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State and the Labour Government promised the people of Northern Ireland that they would repeal and replace the Legacy Act. They have not. They promised through this 2-year extended parliamentary session that they would deliver legislation that attained support across the community. They have not. It is delayed at the moment because of discord amongst his own benches. What does he say to the victims of Northern Ireland who want to see progress?
Well, I say very simply that the government is keen to progress this. It is a very complex, as the Right Honourable Gentleman knows, it's a very complex piece of legislation because, in part, it is having to fix the mess that the Legacy Act 2023 left with this government to deal with. I make no apology for taking time to make sure that we get the legislation right, because, as he knows, this is the last best hope we have.
Gavin Roberts.
The Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee has just heard from the Chief Constable of the PSNI, John Boucher, who indicated that he, the Secretary of State, has put in a claim to Treasury for an additional hundreds of millions of pounds to fund the Legacy Commission, but yet the PSNI has nothing. They have £200 million of civil liability cases with them. They have no resources to progress. Even if they were asked for information, they couldn't provide it. Does he recognise there's a legacy funding deficit within the PSNI, and will he too similarly seek money for them?
Well, I would say to the Right Gentleman that the creation of the Legacy Commission took away from the PSNI some 1,000 cases. 1,000 cases that it fell to them to investigate, and that cost has been transferred to the Legacy Commission. Whoever is investigating them, whatever the system is, they will have to be looked into, and when they are looked into, disclosure will be required.
Paul Forster.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I will answer questions 3, 10 and 11 together. On the 10th of April, we will celebrate the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, which nearly 30 years ago brought an end to the Troubles and enabled Northern Ireland to establish a power-sharing government. In the years since, Northern Ireland has been transformed, and I look forward to working with everyone to make further progress.
Paul Foster.
We approach the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, historic in that it ultimately delivered peace for a generation. With the knowledge that it requires constant political cooperation and public support, its biggest challenge, no doubt, is the Tory reform policy of leaving the ECHR. If the UK left the ECHR, it would undermine a core principle of the agreement. Does the Secretary of State agree that there are some within this chamber that would wholly compromise the peace in Northern Ireland for short-lived, ill-judged political gain?
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend, and I do not understand why some are advocating removing the ECHR from the Good Friday Agreement. It would be highly irresponsible, and I think it shows a complete lack of understanding about what the agreement involved, because you cannot just walk in and pull out one of its pillars for the sake of party ideology.
That's a good tell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Good Friday Agreement was a landmark achievement of the last Labour government, and it is a beacon of hope for conflict-affected states around the world. Now, before coming into this place, I had the privilege of witnessing and experiencing Northern Ireland young people's leadership in this area, where they shared their experiences and the lessons from the Good Friday Agreement. So with that in mind, can the Secretary of State tell me what he is doing to share the UK's expertise and to ensure that others affected by conflict can benefit from it as well?
Secretary of State.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. The biggest lesson of the Good Friday Agreement is it takes immense political courage to say yes rather than to go on saying no. And to pick up her point, back in the end of last year, the Foreign Secretary convened the Western Balkan countries under the Berlin process at Hillsborough Castle, and the First and Deputy First Minister talked through how Northern Ireland has made this extraordinary progress. One example of how the lessons of that agreement are being heard around the world.